I love how this is turning out to be such a memorable year for the horror fans. The early teasers of Resident Evil were already exciting, and now the trailer reveals that we are in for a memorable experience in the theaters when the movie releases on 18th of September. I must admit I am a huge fan of Zach Cregger, especially after his work in Weapons, and now as a fan of the game I think that the franchise is in safe hands. Even the trailer makes it very clear that he understands the true essence of the game, and every scene reminds me of some of my gaming experience. Also, this is a fresh story that is related to the extended lore, and the nail-biting trailer focuses on Bryan, who seems to be the central character in the movie. There are far too many hidden details and references to count, and in this video, I will unveil it all for you so that you are better prepared when you head into the theaters. The opening hospital sequence establishes Bryan. This really is a no-nonsense trailer, and you can see Bryan in the first few seconds of the footage as he moves through a busy hospital corridor. He has a special medical box in his hands, and it is immediately clear that he runs an emergency service where he transports organs. He is just done with one such assignment when a doctor or maybe a representative at the hospital offers him another. At this point, Bryan is like me when I cannot refuse an extra task if I am offered a higher reward. Initially, Bryan is quick to say that he all wrapped up for the day, but when the woman points out that the place is outside the zone and it pays double, Bryan is quick to accept. Well, this turns out to be his undoing if you go by the rest of the trailer, but it is still a great introduction to the character. We know that he needs money desperately, and he is willing to take up extra gigs if it means making some quick bucks. A troubled relationship and the beginning of the crisis. I don't think you can deliver the perfect horror flick without establishing that the protagonist has some personal issues that he is dealing with. I mean, it has just become a staple at this point. As for Bryan, it is established soon enough that he has some issues with his girlfriend. As he drives off into the darkness for his assignment, he is shown having a conversation with his lady over the phone. He requests her to not go and stay with someone named Katie, and his girlfriend Michelle seems pretty upset about how he is negligent enough to ignore her feelings, and how he didn't find it important enough to talk it out face to face. God forbid a man trying to make a good living in peace. But jokes apart, the conversation soon turns from a relationship dispute to an outright crisis, because Bryan hits someone on the road. The windshield wiper credits look absolutely breathtaking. You can tell a lot about the creativity of a director from the trailer alone. And I love how the trailer footage gives you the credits on the windshield wiper. It looks so cool as the red writing appears on the dark background and gets wiped off to reveal the next. From the mind of Zach Cregger, the director of Weapons and Barbarian, is enough to set the tone for what you can expect from the movie. Also, the trailer doesn't stop to show you the credits, and this is also a smart move because the continuity is not broken whatsoever. The trailer in itself feels like a tiny short film, and I love the vibe. The first zombie encounter. The first zombie encounter that Bryan faces is right after the accident. To be fair, he is speeding without paying much attention on the road, and the roads are absolutely empty and dark, so an accident wasn't really surprising. But it immediately feels off when he rams into a woman and screeches to a halt. After he gets down from the car, you can see footsteps on the snowy road, and clearly, whoever he has hit is not as injured as she should have been after being rammed at full speed. We all know what that means, don't we? I wouldn't rule this out as the first zombie encounter, even though the next scene suggests that Bryan probably doesn't see the zombie just yet. The mysterious house in the middle of nowhere. Even if I keep aside the fact that this is a Resident Evil movie, the premise and setting are enough to put together a solid independent horror film. Just consider this for a premise where the protagonist's car breaks down in the middle of nowhere following an accident, and he is forced to go looking for help in a house that is eerily empty. That is precisely what happens, and the trailer shows Bryan walking up to this house as he knocks nervously on the door. Well, clearly no one is home, but the door is open and the lights are on. The first thing he does is find a phone and call his girlfriend, a true lover boy that he is, but it goes straight to voicemail. Also, you get a clear sign that shit is about to go down, and the setup is just perfect here. The lingering typewriter shot. When Zach Cregger was on board with this project, one of the first things that he spoke about was his love for the video game. Well, clearly the man understands what makes the game special, and you can see a couple of massive references in the trailer itself. For instance, the lingering shot of a typewriter in a quiet room is hard to miss, and the video game fans will immediately understand the reference here. This is a typical save mechanic in the game because the rooms that have the typewriters are usually deemed safe. Now, I don't know if that will hold true for this particular room in the movie, but it is still a fun reference nonetheless. The ammo crisis triggered my PTSD. You know it is a true Resident Evil movie when the protagonist has to search for ammo everywhere, and it is a panicking moment of the highest order because you can see the threat approaching from the corner of your eye. The lead character Bryan stumbles upon a gun in the trailer, but it is not loaded, and as a zombie-like figure approaches from a distance, he must scramble to find the ammo box in time. It just so happens that he finds the ammo just in time in a drawer. But the struggle to find the ammo and the 10 seconds that pass reminded me of my time in the gaming chair when I would desperately look for ammo everywhere. Zach Cregger had remarked earlier that scrounging for supplies is a solid reference to Capcom's games, and just like players are rewarded for looking through every drawer and cabinet, Bryan finds the ammo after looking in a few places. Also, it is worth noting that the shotgun shells that he eventually finds are of the same brand as the ones seen in Resident Evil 4. More than just zombies. Now, this is something that might be upsetting for those who are expecting an outright zombie slasher, but I see Zach Cregger as someone who is surely going to introduce his innovation. In fact, the director has revealed during an interview that the movie is not just about the zombies. He said, "This movie doesn't utilize zombies that much. It's much more focused on the weird creature stuff than the zombies, and there are just 2 or 3 scenes where there's proper zombie stuff going on." Well, 2 of those 3 are in the trailer itself, so you know that Cregger will use the opportunity to focus more on what the T-virus does to the human body. And honestly, I don't mind this approach. Bryan is a regular guy. I think this is a pretty significant detail about the movie because the protagonist Bryan is not someone you would expect to fight and survive a deadly outbreak. I mean, he is just a regular guy with a job, and he is definitely not an action hero like Leon or Chris Redfield. You can probably compare him with Ethan Winters from Resident Evil 7 Biohazard and Village. The drama with his girlfriend is actually deeper than what you see in the trailer, and those fortunate enough to experience the first 18 minutes of the movie in a special screening have revealed that his girlfriend is pregnant. So you can expect some determination to survive, and everything in the trailer indicates that Bryan might be an everyman, but he simply doesn't give up. The first-person POV is straight out of a game. I was fascinated by the scene where Bryan follows the trail of bloody footprints into the forest, and the scene is filmed in first-person POV. You can see Bryan using his phone's flashlight to see the way ahead, and it is eerily uncomfortable, as you expect something terrible to happen at any moment. This is a clear throwback to the game because I remember many of these tense and creepy moments from the games that terrified me to no end. At this point, our protagonist is unarmed, and you know there is a genuine threat around him, so the tension is palpable. A little spoiler from the early footage. I have already mentioned in this video that the first 18 minutes of the film have been screened for a selective group, and of course, it reveals a lot more than the trailer. However, if you do not want the spoilers, you can forward about a minute in this video. After being sent off to complete an extra delivery, Bryan crashes into a woman who strangely steps onto the road from the woods. After looking for her in the forest, Bryan eventually finds her on her back with her arms stretched out over her body. She seems to be alive, and this is where Cregger pulls a classic horror comedy move, as Bryan carries her back to the car in this position. She keeps trying to grab him and he keeps swatting her off, unaware of the actual danger that she poses. He is soon pulled over by a deputy who doesn't want him to drive further in these snowy and blizzard conditions, but the deputy agrees to escort him to a hospital, even though the cruiser goes flying off the road and any potential help is blocked off. When Bryan goes to check, he finds that the deputy is dead and the woman is missing. Also, the radio in the deputy's car informs us about an emergency situation, which I am sure is the outbreak in Raccoon City. Bryan fights off the attacking woman with the deputy's handgun, and in typical video game style, he starts off with a basic weapon, and he doesn't even know how to use it. To make matters worse, his car stops working, as does his phone, and he is left seeking for a refuge in the middle of nowhere, which brings him to the house that we see in the trailer. more survival horror than action horror. Zach Cregger hasn't been very secretive about this, and he has always described the upcoming movie as more of a survival horror film than an action horror film. You can see that from the trailer as well, and I understand that some fans of the franchise are not happy because the movie is not a direct adaptation of the source material. With creative and talented directors like Cregger, you can always expect them to add something of their own, and I am personally glad that he has been given the opportunity. If you look closely, you will see a similar vibe as Cregger's favorite Resident Evil games like Resident Evil 4, Biohazard, Village, and Requiem. The house has classic Resident Evil vibes. So Bryan heads into this farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, and it is mysteriously empty. But let's talk for a second about the aesthetics of the house. Everything inside screams the 90s, and the designs and furniture and other detailing are straight out of the initial Resident Evil games. The weird pictures on the wall and the classic old pillows on the couch all remind me of something terrifyingly familiar. Of course, there is a landline phone as well, which Bryan uses to call his girlfriend and leave her a message. The gun looks like the hunting rifle from Resident Evil 7. I have already spoken about the gun that Bryan comes across, hanging on the wall of the house. Well, this too is a familiar weapon that the fans of the franchise will recognize this as the hunting rifle from Resident Evil 7. Of course, Bryan wouldn't have been able to remove it from the wall if this was in a Spencer mansion, but here it is just a simple weapon that he is able to use to defend himself. The rifle works on 2 bullets, and the next thing you know, Bryan is left scrambling for ammo, which again is something that I have covered earlier in this video. The first trailer suggested that Bryan gets his hands on an assault rifle at some point, so I am sure we will see him using a variety of weapons and his wits to survive the crisis. Does Bryan hear someone in the house? There is a shot that shows Bryan looking up at the stairs, and the look on his face suggests that he has heard something. The trailer already reveals that the zombie woman from earlier is running toward the house, and it is a genuine threat that Bryan has to brace for. If someone is already inside the house, it just makes it worse for him. But I guess the poor guy cannot catch a break as the world crashes around him. Bryan emerges from a manhole and stands before a city in ruins. By now, you can tell that the outbreak has worsened and normal life as we know it is gone. If you remember a scene in the trailer earlier, Bryan was seen moving through the sewers, and here, he is shown standing before an open manhole as he stares at the lifeless city before him. This is probably Raccoon City, and Bryan's struggles are far from over. We eventually see some bodies falling, and if this is indeed Raccoon City, then we are just getting another point of view here. The director has been shielding Raccoon City in the trailer, but I am sure we will see a lot more of the aftermath of the outbreak in the movie. The trailer footage does have a gory detail where you can see the bloodied snow streets and the bloodied cars with all the corpses lying around. Carl shows up, played by Paul Hauser. This is another interesting character who is introduced in the trailer, and this one is played by Paul Hauser. Carl could be an umbrella scientist, and he could be attempting to debrief someone, or maybe he is the one who has summoned a cure in the first place, and suddenly Bryan might have more significance than you think. Is Bryan carrying the cure to the outbreak? The bag that Bryan is carrying might not have an organ after all. Well, he doesn't know about the contents of the bag himself, but from the looks of it, this is the kind of bag that you can find often in the Resident Evil games. Also, some of the fans have theorized that he might actually be carrying the cure to the outbreak, which would be pretty awesome because the survival of Bryan then becomes all the more important. Expect a fast-paced horror flick. The movie has a really short runtime of less than 90 minutes, and with so much happening, I think it is safe to say that we are in for a fast-paced narrative. I think it works great for a Resident Evil movie that takes a strong no-nonsense approach. There is no time wasted to set up the characters or the crisis, and you are straight in the middle of it with no warning. Also, there is a chance that the ending might be open-ended, in case they have plans to set up a sequel, and as long as we don't have to wait for the sequel for years, I really don't mind. With someone like Cregger in charge, I expect this to become one of the highest rated Resident Evil movies of all time. And I have a feeling that the franchise is in safe hands, especially if he is allowed to continue. I have loved the new trailer, and the reviews for the first 18 minutes of the film are quite promising. I cannot wait to see this in the theaters, and for all the Resident Evil fans out there, you better block your dates already for the grand release. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the latest trailer, and also share your views on the things that you would like to see in the movie. If you appreciate the efforts to bring you this content, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more such videos.